Hello and welcome to the Non-Fungible Stories Show. This is your host, Non-Fungible TC, Non-Fungible Today and Non-Fungible Tomorrow. Today we are extremely and very honored to have Evans. He is the Group President of Animoca Brand, and he is also the Chairman of the Board of the Silver Exchange, and he also serves on the board of the Urban Renewal Authority, Sun Hung Kae Co. Limited, and Asia Financial Holdings Limited as Independent Non-Executive Director and other civic voluntary positions. So good afternoon, Evans, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Tim. Happy to be here.
So it is a really great pleasure to have you here. And Evans, I know that in previous interviews, and I've been watching a lot of your previous interviews, the focus would be on the metaverse and about the blockchain and NFTs. But in this interview, I would like to share your story and your experience to our viewers. So prior to Animoca Brands, I know that you work in different industries, such as banking and finance, management consulting, public transport and technology. So can you tell us more about your background and story?
Yeah, well, I am Hong Kongian. I'm born and raised in Hong Kong, right? So, we have immigrated to the U.S. when I was 12. I returned to Hong Kong promptly after I graduated. I actually, like many people from Hong Kong, got very interested in finance because it's sort of where everybody, many of our friends go. But to me, finance isn't really what I wanted to do. But then I wanted to start with it because I thought that I want to learn a good business basis, right, from it. So I entered banking, right? But I always wanted to be more of an entrepreneur, but I thought that after banking, I didn't really have the skill set to do it. So I went for an MBA, so returned to the US for that. And then I thought entering management consulting would then be a good path forward, right, to get myself broad business knowledge. Then I can start my own business, right? But as it turns out, I got to understand myself a little bit. And those folks who actually go to, go for like good schools or good MBA programs tend to be people who are the most conservative, right? and therefore may not be as entrepreneurial, right? So I did enter management consulting. I wanted to be there for 3 years, but I actually ended up spending 8 years at McKinsey. But it really taught me a lot, right? So it prepared me for a career as an executive, which is what I wanted to do. I know I wouldn't be on an advisory side for a long time because I really want to do like real stuff, right? If you know what I mean, right? So create real value, right? I guess as a consultant, other than being a career consultant, which some people do choose, right? People tend to leave the industry to go into a field of its own, right? At the time at McKinsey, I was focused a lot on transportation, right? So actually MTR was one of my large clients, and then other transportation companies as well, other railway companies, ports, etc. Right? I got picked up by Kowloon Motor Bus Company, which is a large, one of the largest Hong Kong companies, but it runs public buses on a for-profit manner, right? So it makes it a very interesting business because you balance what is public interest with what is a purpose for profit purpose that you're going after, right? And I think after consulting, it's actually would be great if you can actually run a company, right? It's not like everybody got that opportunity. So that was an opportunity that was, to me, it was very lucky to be able to get that and run a iconic Hong Kong company as the de facto deputy CEO at the time. So very interesting from that perspective, right? And at the time, I would say that I guess KMB was under a bit of pressure because the oil prices was high, and then the MTR was expanding its network and all that. So I had a burning platform to change the company, right, in terms of reorganization. So I was front and center and trying to drive that, and a host of other things in improving the company, right? But but in a bus company, you can either sort of, shall I say, either there's a lot to do when you're under a lot of pressure, or that after a while it becomes sort of steady state and there's not a lot to do again, right? So, and I left for an international company, GLG, which is really about provision of network expert advice to the likes of professional investors, right? So that was an international role. I enjoyed it a lot. So I was there to really accelerate the growth of Asia. I guess I did that quite, relatively well. and was recognized for it. And then I took over the Europe footprint as well. So I was running both Asia and Europe and Middle East, Africa as well. So and then that got the footprint to the point where it's a pre-IPO standard. So the company has gone on and filed for IPO. I thought that was about another chapter that's closed, right? So, which then lead to, I guess, Animoca, right? Which is then yet another industry. I guess my career has been sort of like, looking at analyzing, scaling, leading companies, understanding what it needs. And for Animoca is really, honestly, by far, not to say that any of my employees in the past was not exciting, but this is by far the most exciting I have ever done, right? And for the purpose in which it seeks, right, which is to further the development of Web 3.0 in an open manner, right? So the purpose is what I believe in. I knew the founder, Yat Siu, as a friend about 8 years ago. And we have connected very well. So it's very important to have that kind of relationship as you enter the company, because you're in the fight together, right? Because the company obviously is doing well, but it has a long path to go in terms of its development to maximize the opportunity that it sees today.
So thank you so much for your introduction. And it goes to the next question that I would like to ask. So how do you first encounter NFTs and the blockchain? Did Yat Siu introduce it to you? And at first, what was your impression towards it? And was it hard to transition from your previous background to becoming the good president of Animoca Brand? And because you have to learn a whole new technology, you have to learn a lot of new terminologies as well. And you have to understand what exactly is true digital ownership as well.
Yeah, I mean transitions I've done before, right? So from banking to management consulting to buses to expert network to then blockchain, right? So I've done transitions, right? And that in fact that is what excites me, because I get bored after a while, because once there's no challenge in a given company or industry, then you got to move on, right? It's how I've always lived my life in terms of wanting challenge and wanting intellectual challenge as a whole. So the difficulty in transitioning any jobs or any new industry is really the initial learning, right? But I'll say that nothing is very difficult if you want to put your time to it, and then also if you're passionate about something, right, then you would take the time to learn it, right? So that part is always a given, right? So yes, it's hard, but no, it's not hard, right? Because you can always rely on some of your functional skills that you've learned from the past. That's how you contribute. But at the same time, you got to be excited about the product and the purpose that the company does, which, I think there are a lot of people who would be excited about this if I would just tell them that obviously it's very, very exciting. And I think a lot of people resonate with that statement, right? So how did I come across it? Yes, I would say that Yat has spoken to me about this in actually 2017, at a particular dinner that we're both in, and he talked about blockchain gaming as the next big thing, right? That was 2017 when he just got into the distribution of CryptoKitties with Dapper Labs, right? And that was how actually Animoca walked into blockchain and blockchain gaming, because Animoca has been traditionally been a sort of a app-based game company, right, or mobile game company, right? So that's sort of what it focused on. But then, the vision of Yat, who's been really in the technology industry for a long time, really sees that digital asset ownership is really going to be transformative. Now, how do I take that? Well, I'm a gamer myself, right? So I try to be more disciplined sometimes and to try I got to reduce my game time, but I totally understand what it is, right? So as a lot of gamers would be kind of like, oh, I earned that. And by the way, I actually... So by the way, for the revolution, so I've been a gamer all my life. So, I was actually one of the early adopters of, let's say, at the time, Space Invaders and all that. And actually, I was a bit spoiled as well. We got, because my parents went to Japan, they actually bought a a little machine, which is the arcade machine at the time, right? The guy gay, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you bought
Yeah.
one that's like sitting down at home, and because there was kind of like a test for my dad's business and going to the arcade business, right? So he actually opened a couple of arcade stores at the time, which he thought was a good business. So we have all of these boards which you plug in, and then you can like play games or so. I've been like growing up with games, and then you had the Apple II, and then all that stuff, and
Yeah.
PC games thereafter, right? And so it's been part of my life. And by the way, so we transitioned from that into sort of like higher fidelity console type games, like like Nintendo, then Sony PlayStation. I've been doing that as well. And then later on, obviously, it became more of a mobile revolution, right? Where it's about sort of free to play, right? So in free to play games, about 3 to 5% of the players actually would pay to play the game, right? Most of the people would play for free. I happen to be one of the 3 to 5% who are impatient enough to be upgrading, right? Buy the packs. I don't do it all the time, like unscrupulously, but I did invest, quite a bit of money, right? Definitely in the 4 figures in Hong Kong dollar terms, right? And let's say a Clash Royale is got okay, buy the pack. So $3.98. Should I not? And then like, this is okay. And now I get my cards upgraded and all that. So I understand digital asset ownership, right? But we believe those are what you own, but in fact, this is rented, right? So when the concept of the digital asset ownership was introduced to me, I'm kind of like, wow, you know what? This actually is a pretty big change, right? And then you see the results of sort of what when Yat spoke to me, this is shortly after I left GLG, about the things that's been happening in the industry since the COVID lockdown, which by the way accelerated the transition into digital asset ownership. From sort of the sandbox and from ref racing or F1 Delta time at the time, you could see the success of this building on and catching on. CryptoKitties being the first case, and then you can see the engagement level of fans, right? And then there's this thing that is also going on, which is play to earn, right? Which really, during lockdown has allowed people from let's say the Philippines or Indonesia to really earn an income, right? That is more than their minimum wage, right? And I think that's really exciting in this industry.
Yeah, I think what is really exciting is I didn't know you were a gamer as well.
Yeah, I am. And in fact, I set time limits, but
Okay.
I exceed them on a daily basis. So I wanted to be disciplined, right? So now I have an excuse. When I'm playing, I'm just working.
Yeah, absolutely. Because usually when you talk about a good president or executives in a company, right, you wouldn't associate them with being a gamer, but because you grew up with games, you're also a gamer, and it makes you perfect for this position because you understand what it means. You understand that this is a weapon that you grinded for so long, and then now you truly own this digital asset, right?
Yeah. By the way, Tim, I want to add this, right? What I don't like, right, about some of these things, and then, again, I refer to Clash Royale, is that, I got all my cards to pretty much to level 13. By the way, I didn't do them through upgrades. I initially upgraded, and then I didn't really purchase anything thereafter. Right? So I grinded a bit, right? Because I did spend a lot of time on. So to get all your cards to level 13 actually takes some effort, right? And then what that happens is that they introduce level 14, right? And and of course, this is what you call inflation, right? What do you call inflation? Because the element of inflation is always introduced in free-to-play games in order to attract, continuous engagement, monetization, and then also attraction of new players into the system. Now, when games are so inherently focused on monetization, the player experience tend to deteriorate because then it's less about game experience than about monetization of the game itself by the creators, right? Because it's the creativity there, it's the pace of introduction of new cards, new weapons, making the game interesting, right? So what are we doing this for is a very important question, right? Which goes to the purpose of Animoca and why I joined the company is that the company needs to be and has to be purpose driven for me to be really excited about it, and which is what it is, because we are looking at building an open Web 3.0 that is focused on the community and building the right experience for all.
So this actually relates to my next question is that since you're working in Web 3.0, you've been in the industry for quite some time right now. What is your advice to someone who's interested in pursuing a career in Web 3.0?
Well, first of all, it's sort of important to be exposed, right? So I think the traditional issue that I see, especially in a place like Hong Kong, is that people want to go into finance and other traditional industry or professional industries like law, accounting, etc. Those are good careers, and it's not like that I didn't go to banking and consulting myself. Right? I did, but I think what I want to talk about is mindset, right? About where we are in the 21st century, right? The internet has literally changed everything, right? So from Web 1.0, where we're talking about, basically information based, one way sort of information, and then interactions is sort of limited. At the time, people were talking about, why do I need the internet, right? I get all the information, I can go to the library and get books and all that. To the whole point where people's lives have been transformed by it. And then once it goes into the mobile, then it becomes another transformation, right? Because which then enables a bit of what we call Web 2.0 today, which is peer-to-peer, right? At the end of the day, you sort of like, now we're entering a new space as well, which is Web 3.0, which is blockchain-based digital asset ownership based, which is an open system. And this will revolutionize the internet as we know it, right? Because it's just powerful when you can own assets digitally, right? Now, once you believe in that, so the first thing is the belief, right? What does this do, right? Ask yourself that question. What does this do, right? Then you can understand about what does a Web3 career mean? Are you going to be like do you want to be in the technical side and the coding side? Then it's about learning the right languages, right? So I think any Solidity engineer will be picked up like a snap right now. So yes, learn your Java, your C, etc. But you should also get to the point where you have enough of an open mind to sort of learn new things. So learning to learn is important, because a lot of the languages that we're now talking about and dealing with are new, right? So if you want to work on a new blockchain, let's say a L1 blockchain like Flow or whatever, it's entirely new. So the mindset is important. So learn to learn is important. And the number one thing that we talk about in terms of hiring is that, what is this person's mindset? We no longer, in traditional industries, remember by the way, I've been through all this, right? In banking and consulting interviews, it's got like, by the way, in consulting interviews, they're especially tough because you start with a case interview, right? So, okay, well, estimate the number of pencils that, schools have in China or something, right? So you kind of put in this, system where you're trying to be very smart about things and all that. But that's a lot about knowledge and training. But here about Web 3.0, it's about learning to learn. It's about the attitude, which is much, much more important than the hard skills that you have, right? So what we look for is passion, right? What we look for is curiosity. What we look for is faith and belief in yourself, confidence, right? It's all the soft skills that we talk about, and the character traits, right, that we're talking about that are so important, about perseverance, about zest, about all these things about teamwork. Those are things that are really important in the Web3 space, right? And then of course we do have to talk about the hard skills of then you actually have to learn, if you want to be a programmer, you have to learn the language. But you want to on a business side, then then there are a lot of ways to do it too. First, by entering the space, the play to earn space. There are many ways of doing it, right? Go in the sandbox to explore it, right? Downloading a copy of Crazy Defense Heroes to play around with it a little bit. There are a lot of ways to do it in terms of play to earn space. With YouTube videos to launch, understand it, right? And once there's a saying which Yat talked a lot about, which is kind of like, those who have sort of gone down a rabbit hole, they have never come out of it, right? so that's kind of going down the rabbit hole is the important thing.
Okay, thank you so much. So, because both of us are also in Hong Kong, right? And I've noticed that you're involved in many committees that decide on policies in Hong Kong, which makes me curious that how can policymakers do, what can they do to make Hong Kong a more modernized city? And with regards to, tokenizations or even Web 3.0, and also is this part of the agenda as well as policymakers?
Well, I would say that one of my passion is obviously thinking, right? So the think tank Civic Exchange where I'm chairman of focuses on environment, which we would bring into the blockchain space because we also have to bring sustainability to the world of how of blockchain, also Animoca itself, right? So that's TBD in terms of that agenda. But in terms of policy making and furthering the space, I think people recognize that Animoca is a world leader in this space, right? And one of the top blockchain NFT companies there is, right? And it's grown from Hong Kong. And it's actually a multinational company, right? So we have 600 employees. I think we have 500 of those, right? That resides outside of Hong Kong. But Hong Kong is an attractive place to attract capital, to grow capital, to have headquarter talent, if you will. Right. The most important thing at this point for policymakers to consider is how do they embrace Web 3.0? Right. Now, the question still remains as to how much do they actually embrace this, right? So whereas there is some degree of caution, right, in terms of cryptocurrencies and NFT and the speculative nature of how some participants are doing this, it shouldn't detract the core attention that policymakers ought to have on what is real behind this, what is the core value creation, right? So the issue sometimes is that there's an echo chamber in terms of conservatism of some officials from hearsay, from reading the news and the media, rather than really investing the time and seeing it for themselves, right? So for us, which is, our differentiation is not great returns, which we're provided, but the differentiation really is the purpose of why we're doing this. Now, if we were to talk about the core purposes of what we are really trying to achieve, which is, open Web 3.0, it's really about the ecosystem building, right? We're investing and we're operating at the same time, right? So we have these operating companies that we have, either acquired or built ourselves, these assets that we have. And we also have investments that we've made, over 150 of them. That is really about facilitating the growth of the ecosystem so that folks from these seed and Series A round have a chance to be successful with the capital we've provided them, right? So we're developing an ecosystem. We're trying to make this successful. And that itself is a social purpose, right? Yes, there's some that would work and there's some that might work out less, right? But, some investments have returned hundreds of times, right? And that's the mindset that we have, is that it's really for that purpose of building the ecosystem that excites us. And ultimately, for Hong Kong, it's sort of like, answering the question of where are we on crypto? Where are we on NFT? So, no one moves forward by fear, right? Or concerns, right? You can only move forward via, informed research, right? Evidence-based policy making, which is what, by the way, Civic Exchange is about, which is what we looked at. We're nerdy, we're analytical about the environment. How do you make policy from there? And I believe the same for Hong Kong in terms of technology policy, right? So, Hong Kong embraces it, but frankly speaking, if you look at sheer sizes of talent pools, you would believe that Shenzhen actually has more net talent than Hong Kong would have, right? Now, should it always be that way? No. And should we look at it from a Greater Bay perspective? I think so too, right? But Hong Kong also needs to occupy its own space because it is a place where the rule of law is international, where exchanges are international, and where capital flows freely, right? So I think it is important that we embrace the digital asset revolution and mix supportive policies to facilitate the growth, right, and to embrace the industry. And I think that's important, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So moving our topic from Hong Kong to Web 3.0. So the reason, and moving to some harder questions. The reason why I met you was that I was listening to your sharing at the Digital Entertainment Leadership Forum 2021 a few months ago, where you discussed about how Web 2.0 is being controlled by only a few big technology conglomerates, right? And you also discussed how Web 2.0 users' data are being controlled by only a few companies. But right now, because of Web 3.0, we want to make this decentralized and we want to give back the ownership towards users themselves. And but my question would be, as Animoca is becoming a bigger player within the space, and as you start to acquire different blockchain related companies and gaming companies, one day, I mean, even right now, Animoca is like the biggest blockchain gaming company in the world right now. So are there any check and balances to prevent the company from, repeating the same mistakes from the previous Web 2.0 companies of having too much control or, being too dominated within the space?
Well, I mean, the ultimately the premise of this is blockchain, right? Which itself is decentralized to begin with, right? So there's an automatic check there, right? And it's because we believe in this purpose that we enter into it in the first place. So that is the DNA of the organization, right? And it's sort of like, we're saying that, Yat and I had this discussion about, hey, this, what do we do here? What do we do? We made a lot of decisions based surely on values of what we believe in, right? It needs to become like everything needs to be built open, right? It's the way we're so open source. We don't as you know, right? That the codes are not they're not hidden somewhere, right? We're building on top of each other. They're layers, right? Of what we do. So it's a little bit different from platform companies where the premise of that, by the way, is sort of the growth of this of the data companies is really sort of a bit representative of what is the problem with modern day capitalism in the first place, right? Which is that there's a discovery that actually people create data, right? And that data is valuable only if it's amalgamated with similar, when you make sense of bunches of data, right? And before anyone has discovered the value of this, there's already a lot of data being created, being mined and all that, and for free, right? And then regulations and et cetera has become too slow in catching up to it, right? Which is really the speed of innovation, which is kudos to the companies that did that. But the issue is then the pressure on shareholders' return and maximization of shareholder returns then become the most dominant driving force behind the purpose of these companies, right? Which is then not the right thing, because it's not really, what are you doing this for? You're doing this for shareholders, for yourself, and just for the returns. And therefore it gets in this vicious cycle of more and more monopolistic behavior. Now, why is it, your question is that how can we avoid this? Well, the avoidance of this is actually very simple. The core value proposition of what we're developing is to build open and building it for the community. And if you want to close it, it's possible, by the way, to have closed metaverses, right? So if you look at Facebook's or Meta's metaverse, it is a high fidelity, virtual reality based kind of a metaverse where it is composed and written by Meta, right? With its own sets of rules, right? You may be able to buy and sell and trade and all that, but it's certainly not freely composable. It may not be interoperable. It's certainly not going to be taken out of the Facebook contacts and selling your assets in OpenSea, for example, right? It's certainly not true digital asset ownership because it is not the blockchain, right? So the very fact that you're leveraging the blockchain and leveraging a decentralized ledger and having that digital asset ownership right already necessitates that this is for the community. Now, the question is then, can you build close? You can still build close. I mean, you can build close blockchains if you want, right? But the purpose of that is then everything is in a walled garden and it becomes your own thing, right? Then the question then becomes, how do you curate and create communities that are credible, right? Based on that. Would your community believe you? So the market forces in our opinion, is that if you don't build open, if you don't allow that ownership to really and the value creation to accrue to the creators and the participants, they will not trust you, right? And they will not have the same engagement. And therefore, the value creation as a whole would reduce, right? Now, so the question is, what kind of company do we want to be? Do we want to be a kind of like, a part of a, small pie, a big part of a small pie, or a small part of a big pie, right? The founding of the company itself, in terms of once we switch into this blockchain universe, since 2017, has always been facilitation of the ecosystem. So that's the core belief of what we do. So we would never build close, right? That's just never going to happen, because we know that it actually makes much more sense, even economically, financially, for the shareholders to be building open.
Okay, so thank you for that. And actually, a lot of people are saying that 2022 is the year of the DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. So I was just wondering if that is something that maybe Animoca Brand was thinking about as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, all our projects will be DAOs in the future.
Okay.
Right? So, yeah, I mean, the point of that is that if you own more than 50% of your governance, rights, then there's no point in doing this, right? It doesn't belong to the community, right? So everything needs to be DAOs, right? In the future, because we're building this for the community. We're not building this for control, right? It doesn't belong, right? Then you get to dictate the rules. If the governance of good governance takes time to build, by the way. And initially, you do need a bit of centralization in order for the experiences to be good. It takes somebody's vision, because you cannot centrally curate, from thin air to have a product. A few people or a group of people need to have the vision to deliver something. But once you're in a stage of sort of more steady state and sort of improvement, that's where more the participatory governance comes in, because you're listening, right? You need to listen to what the community wants to take the metaverse, or take the game, or take that particular asset that you have, right? If you don't do that, then you're not building it for the people.
Okay, because what I was gonna ask is that, because everyone is talking about building a DAO and things like that, and the DAO is actually a relatively new concept, to be honest, because everyone is still experimenting, as you said, in Web 3.0, everything is very new. Everyone is experimenting and learning at the same time. So I was gonna ask, if one day some of the investments by Animoca becomes a DAO, how do you ensure the longevity of the product itself, which I think you answered already, is that in the beginning, you do have some people who have to build the product, who has to make it into a stable product, then kind of involve the community and make decisions together as a DAO.
That's right.
Which comes to my next question, which does not necessarily relate to Animoca, but in terms of a DAO, because a lot of people in crypto is here for the monetary incentive. Some of them are here for the short-term gains and things like that. So is there any ways a DAO or a group of people could do in order to make sure that the decisions being made are not short-term, but is for the longevity of the DAO itself?
Well, by the way, so there are folks who participate, who are who do it because of FOMO, right? So you're missing out, and also what I would call flippers, right? So a lot of people go, I took the ride up, and then it's kind of like a DNA of some investors, right? I mean, by the way, a lot of this stuff happens way at the beginning. So once you look at a project and you look at the construction of the tokenomics, you can already see, based on unlock schedule, the profile of investors, and sort of what they're asking for, you can already sort of tell what is this stacking up to be, right? Is it an investor friendly kind of a project, or is it a community friendly type of project, right? And we do things very differently. It depends on that, right? So sometimes we don't even launch a token first. We might just free drop NFTs. As you have seen some of our projects like Phantom Galaxy, we're free dropping. Why do you do that? Because you want the work to be done, right? That the philosophy is very different. Now, if it's about profit maximization, you definitely want to launch a token first, right?
Yeah,
But does that lend itself to community? Because we already know the hype is already there, right? And you don't do it that way because you want people to compose and engage and spend real time on it, right? And then you get rewarded for it rather than kind of flipping for a quick buck. Now, those kinds of decisions, where it's really early stage, are not really made by the community, but it's sort of like, by design, it's sort of like for the community, that's the way we're going to write it. And the rule books, and by the way, and the best practices launches are going to be written based on what we see as kind of like, how do you build the best community? Now, the white paper, the governance, which is important, is a philosophy and a purpose, right? That we talk a lot today about this, right? Now, within a certain project, the white paper, how philosophically it is written, it's also really important, right? Because you can't change your white paper, right? Now, I think your community will leave you if you break your governance promises, right? About how your philosophy of operations are. Now, to then directly answer your question as to how do you avoid people going to short-term profit, is that if your guiding philosophy, the principles behind what it is that you do, which is values-driven, values-based, and is focused on the community, you can't do that because people will point right back to the values that you've then talked about and discussed in your white paper. It's the same thing as kind of like some of the best companies in the world that we see today are very much about their corporate values, right? And you can see that. And they live by it, they talk about it all the time. The same thing as what we're now creating, So within Animoca, there's a set of values, which I talked about. And then, and within each of the projects that we have taken, we have also have the values that we have written into about what this is and how to achieve that. But at the core of it is always about building the community. Again, without community, where are we, right? We're not about creating a large audience that is kind of like, which is a free to play kind of a game where a portion monetized, and therefore you have to be very aggressive in the way you build up the behavioral designs about getting people to monetize and stuff like that and play more and more of it. It's really about getting more and more folks engaged to become asset owners, to earn, to play, to compose, and earn at the same time, because that's valuable to the entire economy in which then you participate into.
Yeah, well, I just actually want to jump in. Like, I'm not trying to show Animoca to the audience, but what you said, like, I want to say that Animoca really does preach and do what they preach. Because I know that for Phantom Galaxy, you guys did a free airdrop to the people who registered the wallet, and then they could actually download the demo and play the game. So you get rewarded for being participating. And I do know that there was an incident where the Discord was hacked, but you guys immediately rectified it and you compensated the community. Like, and you don't really have to do that, but you still did it. And I really appreciate what you guys are doing in the space. And you guys definitely do what you guys preach as well.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's a statement in of itself, right? So, by the way, I could tell you this, right? Because that I've worked in different types of companies, right? So I can share your experience about when these things happen, what tends to happen, right? So your corporate communications department and your legal department comes right in, right? And then kind of like make no statement until we investigate this incident further, right? That is what tends to happen, is that you cannot compensate people because ultimately it sets a precedence toward people expecting this stuff to be done anyway, right? So for us, it's kind of like, there's no discussion, right? Yet goes on, the stance from it, our mistake, don't know what happened, we could have done this better, don't worry, this is for you, right? And by the way, it's not even like, I mean, it's sometimes it's a bit kind of like there are things that we could do better. That's why we admit it. But sometimes it's sort of like, folks have to be careful as well, right? Because on Discord and everything, right? But at the same time, we just took full responsibility for the hack, which is the responsible thing to do. And it really tells you about the values that we have. Is really about not extracting value from the community. We are about delivering value to the community so that they trust us.
Yeah. And I really appreciate because you guys are like the biggest blockchain gaming company here, and then you are setting an example to everyone how it should be done. So moving on to our next question, when we talk about decentralization, we talk about mass adoption and also decentralization in the blockchain, right? But as you kind of mentioned this as well, but from what we see, a lot of brands are entering using key headlines like NFTs and blockchains like that, right? So for example, DC and Matrix issue their own NFTs, but within their own Palm blockchain, which is a closed blockchain. And Fox Masking also use their own blockchain called Illuvio. So instead of a decentralized blockchain like Ethereum chain. So the reason for that is that they wanted to have more control of the IP, which kind of makes sense because they came from the IP is basically how they monetize their, intellectual property. And so what is your thought on this? Is this necessarily a bad thing, or could this be a good thing to introduce mass adoption? Because when they use their own blockchain, they could actually set the gas to be zero, which could actually do help other people come into this space.
Well, I mean, and we're really talking about two issues here. One is that, the purposes of a closed blockchain and then gas fees, right? They're really two different issues, right? So,
Okay.
so I would definitely separate the high gas fee issue with the fact that, Ethereum is still, a dominant blockchain that is using proof of work rather than proof of stake, right?
Yeah.
So that would evolve over time, and then gas fees would be a lot cheaper, right? But then there are also other solutions, L2 solutions, L1 solutions, right? So increasingly there are more usage of Solana, HBAR, Binance, right? So they're just quite a lot, right? And then there are the L2s as well. So at the end of the day, right? Gas fees can be cheap anyway, right? Depends on where you want to put the chains. And by the way, it's very important to state that Animoca is chain agnostic, right? So we built on Polygon, we built on, we built on Flow, we built on Solana, we do everything, right? It's just we believe that where the communities are and where they want to build, we need to support those communities, right? And we don't know where they're going to end up, right? Yeah, there'll be stronger chains and weaker chains. We just built the bridges, right? And it's sort of like that. That's important to us. So gas fees is dealt with at the chain level when chains become successful, right? The issue with closed chains, in saying that it keeps the gas fee low, is really not the central purpose of why they're keeping it closed, right? The central purpose, as you said, is really about control, right? Which is fine, right? You want to control, because you want to, there's a large corporate, you built the IPO for, whatever, how many years, how much effort do you put into building a brand? You want to be careful about it. That thinking is understandable, but that is not what Web 3.0 is about. This is not what digital asset ownership is fundamentally about, right? So it is really important that we get to the point where it is really about embracing the openness of composability. So the issue with closed blockchain is that how large can you make it? Right? It's the same question as what Meta will have to answer, right? I think with the financial resources of Facebook or Meta, they could actually create an experience that's really good. And with the existing community that they have, they would be credible in sort of gaining traction in creating an experience. But the question is then, without true digital asset ownership in that sense, would there be the same level of engagement? Now, then you're talking about smaller projects, branded projects. Without that same community backing, you're keeping it closed. It was not really that tradable. It was not really that, not, composable. You can't take it into different places. Then you own it for the purposes of what, right? Is it a true NFT? And just because you name it NFT, is it really an NFT? That's sort of my question about it. So I'm not for anything closed.
Absolutely. And then we were talking about the gas fees and something like that, and I actually do have a questions about that, but you kind of answered saying that once the blockchain becomes scalable, like say for example, if ETH 2.0 comes out, it becomes proof of work, and then once the block size become bigger, it could kind of be solved. But we'll still have to see. But my other question is that because decentralized apps are actually being financed by the user, because basically when we interact with a decentralized app, we interact with the blockchain, we pay the gas fees. And that's why it is decentralized, and it is different from traditional Web 2.0 apps where you sell your data to advertisers in order to use the service. So is it really possible that we could reach mass adoption with the Web3 apps? Because every transaction requires a transaction fee, right? And is it possible that this space would one day be priced out? Like, would some people be priced out if they can't pay transaction fee for every transaction?
Well, I don't know if transaction fees are actually, under Ethereum, as we said, under proof of work protocol, it is kind of like high, gets congestions and all that. But I think, again, a lot of the projects right now are not necessarily just focused on building on Ethereum, right? There are other protocols that they're built under. And so that's point one, as I've alluded to earlier. Then the question is about where do you then go from here in terms of sort of allowing that creativity to continue to flourish, right? So I tend to think that on the question of gas fees, it is really about the continued innovation of this infrastructure that will allow that innovation and allow those communities to flourish, right? Sorry, you have a second point. I forgot what it was.
Yeah, my second point is basically like you mentioned that there are other chains where the gas fee is a lot lower, right? But in order to interact with the ecosystem, every step costs money because there is a transaction fee
You're talking
involved,
about like the gas fees, and you're talking about where not people will be priced out, right?
Yeah.
So I think the gas fee part is really about other chains, and so it's kind of like communities that will figure out the gas fees, because when you want a project up and running, it has to be practical, right? So I think that's the part that would sort of using market forces to solve itself. But then there's the pricing of the assets itself that I think that you're insinuating that is people can get priced out of, right? So it is important, right, to I guess get in early, right? As all assets gets more expensive over time when it's credible in the community. But there are other ways to participate as well, right? So if you have a community-oriented company that builds these projects like Animoca, we focus on play to earn, right? Or work to earn, if you will, right? It's playing, but it's working at the same time. So if you're composing, you're spending time on it, there are ways in which you can earn tokens, you can earn your assets, etc., simply by participating, right? And yes, you have to get in early because it's a fair economy. So pick things that you're passionate about, right, and get involved early. That's sort of would be my my advice about how do we get into this space.
Okay, I get where you're coming from. Like because as developers build with blockchain, there are more and more things that are happening. It's like participate to earn, like basically interact with the app itself and just engage and like other decentralized social media things like that. So I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are also assets like Ape and Punk, and those are becoming very expensive, right? And is it then possible? Well, there are other assets created by these company as well, right? There are other projects. I mean, you can't. It's like artwork, right? I think it's like trying to own a Monet or a Picasso. It's going to be very expensive later on because it is limited in that quantity, right?
Yeah.
But don't go for the hype, right? Go for what you like and go for what you believe is the future development of a community if you're an investor, right? And by the way, you gotta believe in the core of what it is. You gotta also like it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Rather than
Absolutely.
just investing into it.
Yeah, and actually, I was talking about people being priced out by the transactions because they have to pay for every transaction, right?
Yeah.
But if you just said it depends on the blockchain itself, some of the blockchain has a very low gas fees because they could process more things at a shorter time, right? But I actually was thinking about that there are proof of stake protocols where you can actually buy some tokens, stake it, and then earn yield on that in that token. And basically, you could use those tokens to interact with the blockchain, and you're not priced out. You can still take part in this ecosystem. So
Yeah.
that's how amazing this place is.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Evans. Do you have anything else that you want to share about the blockchain Web 3.0 true digital ownership before we wrap up?
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, the most important thing, in my message is that, we're really at the beginning, right? I think I encourage, your, audience in front of us today to really investigate, invest time and, do more investigation in this space, understand what it is, and don't go for the hype, right? I mean, you're here to just make the quick buck. It has to be more than that, right? The purpose behind what is that we do is really important. And we believe that, especially for the younger generation that really understands digital assets, right? By being gamers or whatever it is, right? It is important to understand the revolution can be one that is quite drastic and fast, right? And to the extent that you want to participate in it, it is really around dedicated time and energy and understanding of it. And yes, your parents may say one thing or another, about what you should not do. But, you do have to, sometimes have the courage to spend some of the time that is a bit unstructured into what you believe are your own personal curiosities for you to discover new grounds. Otherwise, Hong Kong, and Asia is all about, professional services and banking, right? So that would be one-sided. And when this whole revolution is already taking place, you don't want to miss it, right? So that's the FOMO part of it, but it's really FOMO of knowledge rather than FOMO by money, right? I think that part is really important.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that very insightful conclusion to our interview today. So for those of you who are watching, thank you so much, and feel free to like and subscribe. And Evans, it's really a great pleasure having you to share. I really appreciate it. I think we all learned a lot, and yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.